Coming up on the Sky News Daily with me, Niall Paterson, our special correspondent Alex Crawford takes us inside a Syrian prison to meet the first British man to fight for ISIS, who now says he wants to come back.
The world is becoming increasingly complex and volatile. How can we make sense of it all?
I'm Richard Engel.
And I'm Yalda Hakim.
And we present Sky News' latest podcast, The World. Each week, we'll cut through the noise to guide you through the week's global events and explain to you why what happens out there matters to you wherever you are.
We're on the ground in some of the world's toughest places. Listen now to The World with Richard Engel and me, Yalda Hakim, wherever you get your podcasts.
Syria's been a bit of a mess for a while now. But after Bashar al-Assad was forced to flee, the task of rebuilding the country fell to its new president, Ahmed al Sharaa. And what a task that is. Reuniting the various ethnic and religious groups that make up Syria, not to mention the military factions that forced Assad's departure. One of al Shara's biggest challenges lies in the northeast of the country. That's the part run by the ethnically Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, who for various reasons are unwilling to cede power to the man who calls himself their new president. It also happens to be the part of Syria where many of the captured Islamic State fighters are being held. And Sky's special correspondent Alex Crawford has just returned from there.
Well, northeast Syria is a particularly important part of Syria because it has 90% of the oil fields in the area. It's peppered with derricks, which are the oil pumping machines. All over the place you see these derricks digging into the ground, that is controlled and pretty much semi-autonomous from the rest of the country by the mainly Kurdish population there. Kurds being a minority religious and ethnic group, they only form about 10% of the population. But during the fight against ISIS, they were at the spearhead of that international coalition to crush ISIS. And since then, they've been running their own civil administration, their own taxes, their own law courts, just running themselves apart from the rest of the country. And they also have multiple prisons which are filled with ISIS suspects and accused, plus 2 very large detention camps filled with ISIS families.
Clearly these prisons are of interest to the wider world. I mean, if there's any instability, if there's an outbreak of fighting, you could see those Islamic State fighters being released or even escaping from prison.
For the last few years, a lot of countries have been saying ISIS is over. However, the toppling of Bashar al-Assad in Syria has led to a real upsurge in ISIS activity. They have been, it appears, planning, plotting, and trying to regroup for some years now. And they pose a really potent threat, not just to the new peace that they're trying to establish in Syria, but particularly to the West. And the Kurds themselves feel that they will be one of the main targets for any resurgent Islamic State because they're the ones that have been holding them prisoner for all these years. To be honest, the SDF have constantly said over the past few years, and now it's reached an increasing urgency, that they want the international coalition to take back their nationals, to repatriate them and deal with them and sort out justice, but also help them cope with either rehabilitating the young children, trying to give them some sort of future, or come to some sort of resolution where there is a trial, because all of these people have been held in the camps and in the prisons without any trial. There's been no trial, no access to, or very little access to lawyers. Those in prison have been utterly cut off, and that is very worrying for the West, particularly now that Syria is in such a state of upheaval. What happens to these people?
OK, so Alex and her team did manage to get into one of those prisons in the northeast of the country where the SDF are keeping men they claim to have been ISIS fighters. So let's head in with her.
Okay, we've just entered the grounds of the prison. We've gone through the first checkpoint. It's very heavily barricaded. Lots of high walls, lots of razor wire around the edges, lots of sandbags, lots of watchtowers. This is a seriously heavily guarded prison. This prison is ordinarily off limits. It's very rare to get access, not just for journalists, but also human rights organisations, aid groups, even lawyers.
inside these walls, these cells, there are what Syria considers some of the most dangerous foreign fighters that ISIS recruited. We've been brought to the foreigners' wing and told to put on masks because there's a lot of tuberculosis around here. Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you? And who are you?
How am I? I'm Hamza Parvez. I'm from Britain, from London.
Now, you will probably not have a clue as to who this is, but he is significant because he's British. In fact, he was the first Brit to publicly admit to joining Islamic State, arriving in Syria back in 2014. Hamza Parvez became known as Hungry Hamza after posting online about missing fast food. He also used his socials to urge others to join him in the fight to create a caliphate.
I came before the Islamic State was actually established. I travelled to Syria really actually because of the Islamic ideology I had. I wanted to come to jihad. I actually wanted to. I'm not going to lie to you.
Mm-hmm. Did you take part in fighting?
In Syria?
Anywhere?
Well, you know, behind bars, I can't really take the smile and you'll understand.
Tell me what you think about the Islamic State now, because as far as Britain is concerned, you joined up a prescribed terror organisation. You may well have taken part in terrorist atrocities.
They call ISIS a terrorist organisation. Definitely did stuff. That's right. Me now, you're asking me now, 2025. I don't defend the Islamic State. I believe that there was a lot of mistakes made. I believe a lot should have been done very, very, very differently to actually bring the correct picture of Islam to the world. We had that one chance, and we didn't do exactly as it should be done.
Do you think that answered my question? I was saying that the British government still considers you a terror threat because you joined up a prescribed terrorist organisation.
Well,
are you a threat?
I can promise you, you can believe me or not, I can promise you that most of us are absolute no threat to anyone outside. We've been now 6 years in prison. We've had a lot of time to sit and think and replan for ourselves. I mean, when it was in ISIS, everything was very, very fast. You can imagine the sky is completely filled 24 hours a day with drones and planes and bombing and all around the Islamic State there's war happening. So things happen very, very, very quickly.
You were part of that war, unfortunately. You helped contribute to that war.
You have to really actually give me the terminology of contribution. Many people actually came just to live in the Islamic State. Many people, they saw the videos, they said, come if you're an engineer. I know people that are doctors, engineers. They really left everything, years of studying, just to come to live in the Islamic State, not to harm anyone.
But many ended up doing just that.
Yeah, exactly. See, now innocent people got killed in war. It happens from both sides, from our side and from the other side, from the attackers.
But Hamza, you're giving me a history lesson, and it sounds very much like a defence of ISIS.
Oh, well, I'm not here to defend anyone except for
but
myself.
It sounds like it. It sounds like you're blaming the people who tried to crush ISIS for the bombing and the civilian deaths. The reason why those people were bombing you, they would argue, is because ISIS was carrying out executions, was subjugating women, was imposing a very extreme version of Sharia law, which included taking Yazidis as sex slaves. A whole range of human rights abuses. Mm-hmm. That's why you were being bombed.
I'll tell you something, a little bit of inside information. Us within the Islamic State, when we would see the videos, and these are people from Islamic State, we would be absolutely horrified and be scared. Like, how can people make videos which are so horrific again and again, and it just gets more and more and more horrifying? Who are these people with these ideas? How are people getting ideas, such devilish ideas to kill people? Most of us are actually against ISIS more than you guys will be outside. And we're against ideas. Why? Because now we're the ones that are being affected by a lot of decisions of the people that took the decisions back then. Most of them being killed now. But now we're here to basically take the brute force of their mistakes.
Tell me about you, though. I want to hear about you, right? I want to hear about you. What are the conditions like? Has anyone from the British government or a lawyer visited you? What do you want now? And now's your chance, because I've got people breathing down my back. We've got a limited amount of time.
Okay, thank you.
Tell me, what is your position now?
So now what I would say to the British government is that really, and it's only my word against theirs, but I am no threat to Britain whatsoever. Me and the rest of the British guys, we are really no threat to the British government, nor to the British people, because we know if we were to live in Britain, we will live in safety, and they will not harm us. So we will never, ever, ever think to harm anyone. And I'm taking the brunt of my mistakes. I'm now here in prison because of the mistakes that I have made.
And what about the conditions inside the prison? Your human rights, any rights?
If we were to get the rights of dog in RSPCA, the dog compound in Vauxhall, you must know it, we would be very, very happy. We would be over the moon. I mean, 6 years, Alex, I cannot explain to you. I cannot explain to you what's been happening, you know?
It looks like that's the end of our interview. We were given a certain amount of time and it looks like it's finished. The conditions seem very basic. Everyone we've spoken to has said that they have no rights at all. And the problem is there's a big question mark on what happens to them now, especially with the whole of the country in such a state of flux.
Do you know, Alex, anytime I hear an Islamic State fighter with a British accent, it certainly jars. The idea that he would be safe to be released, well, look, I imagine there would be a long debate about whether or not he'd actually be allowed back into the country. But certainly one thing is true. No one wants to see any of those Islamic State fighters back on the battlefield, do they? So are Syria's new president and the head of the SDF, Maslum Abdi, are they talking? Are they working together towards peace?
The two of them have met. They have shaken hands. They have talked about spending the next year trying to come up with some sort of resolution that would suit both sides. But there is a natural doubt and suspicion amongst those living in the northeast. And as I said, mainly they are Kurds, but there are also Christians and Shiites. There is a lot of suspicion about the new president, who once was head of the ISIS Syria affiliate. Now, al Sharaa, the new president, will say, well, listen, I cut those ties nearly a decade ago. I'm a new man. I'm in a new position. I want a unified Syria. And he's come up with a new constitution where he talks about unifying Syria, bringing everyone in. He does not want any rival military group, any armed group. One of the first things he did was try and disband all the armed groups, including his own HTS. But also that clearly was directed towards the SDF in the northeast. He doesn't want a rival group up there. He wants them to belong to the whole of Syria. But many of the people in the streets, you know, people on stalls, they're very fearful about the future, especially when they've seen what appears to be revenge killings of the Alawites, another religious minority group. So there's a lot of suspicion which needs to be overcome before there is going to be peace in Syria, and a huge number of challenges for the new president.
But come on, aren't some of those Kurdish concerns justified? I mean, people did think that the fall of the Assad regime meant an end to the killing, and yet we've seen al Shara's forces targeting minorities like the Alawites that you've just mentioned. So it's not surprising, is it, that the Kurdish leaders are cautious?
Yeah, and I mean, I think a lot of those doubts are founded in a lot of reality. I mean, it's not so distant past to them, you know, that they spent many, many years being persecuted by the Assad regime. They have managed to build up and set up their own autonomous area in the northeast of Syria. It's going to take a lot for them to give up that autonomy. But everyone is tired of war. They are tired of war. The rest of Syria is very tired. So there is a lot of desire to have a unified Syria. They're just very fearful at the moment that if they lay down their arms, if they give up all the economic power that they're sitting on, their control is over the oil-rich region of Syria, where 90% of oil reserves are based, as well as gas fields. They're worried about giving up all of that. But the two leaders met very early in secret. Al Sharaa tried to reassure Maslum Abdi that the Kurds would be safe, that he wants an inclusive Syria. And Maslum Abdi was clearly reassured enough to then sign that very public agreement that they were going to try to work something out. But there's an awful lot that Maslem Abdi will not give up. And he wants to be integrated within the Syrian army. He wants his troops, which include women, to be included in the national army, but to be a separate bloc. And that is what they have to reach an agreement of. So, slowly, bit by bit, the two leaders, at least, are trying to reach some sort of agreement.
Alex, what is at risk if the talks between the two sides don't proceed towards a unified Syria? What is at stake for Islamic State, for Syria itself, and indeed for the rest of us?
Syria is at an absolute turning point right now, and it could go any way. And right now, the new president is desperately trying to control a whole load of militia with crippling international sanctions, which are still in place. He can't even pay most of the militia who helped propel him to power. He's also trying to balance a lot of competing interests from amongst his neighbours, the Turks, who want to see the disbanding of the SDF. He's got Russian demands and Russian offers of help to boost the economy, as well as Israeli troops who are trying to grab more parts of Syria. So there is a lot at stake here. And if they don't agree, we're looking at further civil war in Syria. The upside, though, is this is a real chance for Syria to finally get together and become the prosperous nation that it could be.
That's your lot for today. To see much more from Alex inside Syria, she's been speaking to other foreign fighters, also the wives of the ISIS men. You can just head over to skynews.com for that. And do remember, you can give us a follow if you like what you've heard. Just a click on your podcast app and you'll be getting the daily downloaded every day, just as soon as we publish. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100 every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.